We all think we know the story of the Wright brothers, right? Two clever bicycle mechanics from Ohio, they dream of flying, and through pure grit, they make it happen at Kitty Hawk. It's a fantastic story, but you know what? It's not the whole story, not even close. So let's get into it, because the real story is so much more methodical and honestly, way more interesting.
See, the Wrights didn't win the race to the sky because they were just plucky dreamers. No way. They succeeded because they were obsessed with data, because they were deeply skeptical of what everyone else considered settled science, and as it turns out, they got into some of the most vicious patent fights in history. This isn't just about inspiration. It's a story of conflict, raw genius, and an absolute obsession with control.
To really wrap your head around what the Wright brothers actually did, we have to look past that one famous photo of the first flight. Their real breakthrough, their true genius, was figuring out the right problem to solve. A problem that pretty much the entire scientific world was getting completely backward.
Okay, so at the turn of the 20th century, all the big names in aeronautics were focused on one thing: the power-to-weight ratio. The logic seems simple, right? Just strap a powerful enough engine to a big enough wing, and sooner or later it's got to go up. And yeah, it would go up for a second. The Wrights knew that the air is this chaotic, unpredictable thing. You don't just power through it, you have to constantly balance inside of it.
So this led to two totally different ways of thinking, two completely different engineering philosophies. You had the great men of science on one side, and then you had two bicycle guys from Dayton, Ohio on the other. And believe me, their approaches could not have been more different. The contrast here is it's stark. On one side, you've got people like Samuel Langley, who's the head of the Smithsonian, trying to build these aerial locomotives, giant, heavy machines designed to be super stable and just muscle their way through the air. You probably know how that ended, spectacularly plunging right into the Potomac River. The Wrights, they wanted to build an inherently unstable machine that a pilot could actively, constantly balance.
And that right there, that's their secret weapon. It's why their background was their superpower. Think about it. A bicycle is an unstable machine. It only stays up because you, the rider, are making non-stop, tiny little corrections. That hands-on, intuitive feel for dynamic balance gave them an insight that all the academics with their fancy government grants completely missed.
So that insight led them to their massive breakthrough: three-axis control. A pilot needs to control pitch, that's the nose going up and down; yaw, that's the nose going left and right; and the trickiest one of all, roll. That's one wing going up while the other goes down. The story goes that Wilbur was watching buzzards circling, and he noticed them twisting their wingtips to turn. That was the light bulb moment. It led to wing warping, literally using cables to twist the plane's wings, giving the pilot total control over the machine's balance.
So they had the theory. They knew control was the key. But here's the part of the story that is just a critical lesson for any engineer, any scientist, anyone who builds things. What do you do when your experiments fail, even when you followed the world's best data to the letter?
And that is not an exaggeration. They were this close to giving up. Their early gliders, which they built using the most respected aerodynamic data in the world, from a German pioneer named Otto Lilienthal, were a total flop. I mean, they were dangerously uncontrollable and didn't create nearly enough lift. They were at a breaking point.
This is the question, isn't it? It's what every innovator eventually faces. It is so easy to just assume, well, I must have messed up somewhere. It's a whole lot harder, and it takes a lot of guts, to look at the foundational science that everyone trusts and say, you know what, I think this is wrong.
And that is exactly what they did. Instead of packing it in, they decided to basically throw out the textbooks and start over from scratch. I mean, think about the intellectual courage that takes. They were challenging more than 100 years of accepted scientific data.
So they went back to their bike shop, and with a fan and what was basically a wooden box, they built their own wind tunnel. And in that tunnel, they methodically tested over 200 different wing shapes, carefully recording every single piece of data. They weren't just tinkering anymore. They were building an entirely new, correct data set from the ground up. And what they found was an absolute game changer. There was this fundamental number used to calculate lift, the Smeaton coefficient, and it had been used by scientists for over a century. Turns out it was wrong, significantly wrong. The world's textbooks were flawed, and now the Wrights had the data to prove it. You could argue this discovery was just as important as the flight itself.
And this first principles thinking, it didn't stop there. When they got to the propellers, everyone else was just adapting boat propellers. They called them marine screws, and they were designed to just push air backward. But the Wrights had this flash of insight. They realized a propeller isn't a screw at all. It's a wing that rotates. Its job isn't to push, it's to create lift, just horizontally, to pull the plane forward.
So because they had their own correct aerodynamic data, they were able to sit down and hand-carve propellers that were, get this, 66% efficient. That is a staggering feat of engineering for the time, and it was achieved with pure calculation. It put them light years ahead of literally everyone else on the planet.
So they have a superior control system, they have a hyper-efficient propeller. They'd done it. They had conquered the air. They achieved the first sustained controlled flight in 1903. But this is where the triumphant story starts to get really, really complicated.
Now look, they weren't the only ones claiming to have flown. You hear about other folks like Gustav Whitehead or Alberto Santos-Dumont. But here's the crucial difference, the thing that matters. The Wrights didn't just get airborne for a few seconds. They created the system of flight. They solved the problem of control.
And their superiority was just undeniable. After being super secretive for years to lock down their patents, they finally did public demonstrations in France. And it was no contest. Wilbur was effortlessly flying these complex, beautiful figure eights, while the best pilots in Europe could barely manage one wide, clumsy circle. They were playing a completely different sport.
But this is where the story takes a turn. Instead of creating a new industry, they spent the rest of their lives protecting their invention. They sued Glenn Curtiss, they sued dozens of other aviators, anyone who used any form of three-axis control. And all these lawsuits actually choked the American aviation industry right in its cradle. It allowed Europe to just surge ahead right before World War I.
So in the end, we're left with this really complex legacy. Two absolute geniuses from a bicycle shop who literally rewrote the laws of physics through pure methodical brilliance, but whose fierce need for control might have set their own country's progress back by a decade. It's a powerful lesson, right? That innovation isn't just about the breakthrough itself. It's about what you do with it after. Thanks for tuning in.